Hey guys, and welcome! I'm Enigmius, and this is World of Tanks! Today we're looking at the Minimap, and there's a reason for that. We're doing kind of a beginner's guide sort of episode. A lot of players I see seem to be having a little bit of difficulty. Once they know how to drive their tank, shoot their tank, do the things that basically involve their tank, having a hard time deciding what to do next. Where do I go? What do I do? Who should I be going with? Sometimes there's hard and fast rules based on the kind of tank you're driving. Other times it's not so straightforward. But one thing that everyone can use is the Minimap. And I know a lot of people don't. So we're going to take a close look at that. We're going to do a time-lapse of an entire match from beginning to end with a focus on the Minimap so that you can see how things unfold. And then we're going to take snapshots of the Minimap as we go through and do kind of a telestrator-like discussion of what's going on, just to kind of illustrate how much information we can get just out of that little wee tiny square in the bottom right hand corner of our screen that can help us decide where we might want to go and what we might want to be trying to do. In order to do that, we're going to be looking at the Malinovka map, the great field of Malinovka. Malinovka is one of those maps that you start seeing at Tier 1, which is why I've chosen it for the first one that we're going to look at, because everyone will eventually be familiar with it. You don't have to advance way up the line in order to see it. Quite often, the way it looks at Tier 1 is you have a line of tanks here, and the enemy line of tanks here, or sometimes you're the ones down here and the enemy is across the field, and they just kind of sit there, and eventually someone tries to cross the field this way, and these guys just blast the crap out of them. And then everyone says, "Stop rushing the field, you stupid idiot, you noob. That's dumb. What did you do that for?" And then people say, "But we're sitting here in the bushes or behind this wall with nothing to shoot at. What else are we supposed to do?" And that's how campers are born. It's not because they're stupid, incapable, or indifferent. It's because things don't make sense necessarily. The things they try don't work. People give them a rough time for trying, and then all they have left to do is say, "Okay, well, I'll just sit in this bush and shoot at shit then," because nobody is explaining anything. So I'm not really trying to do a whole lot of strategy map by map, so much as taking a look at various different situations that are highlighted by the Minimap, just to reinforce, hey, if you're wondering what's going on, this is a damn good place to look. Now in this case, this is a higher tier match, but it plays out the same as any other tier. We've started with all of our tanks lined up here, and our artillery right here, which usually means that the enemy artillery is going to be spawning sort of mirrored across the map in this sort of spot here, we can assume, and that the enemy tanks are going to be this way. We know that this is a wall that the enemy can use to great advantage if, like, we're on this side here. It's got windows in it that you can shoot through, but you need to have the tank spotted in order for it to be worthwhile. And then once you've hit a guy, he moves. Like, he realizes he's exposed and he moves. So really not a good situation to try and sit here camping across the field, shooting at one another. And obviously we learned at Tier 1 that this field is a no-go. At least in the early going. Once you've assessed where the enemy is, then you can kind of figure out what's going to work better. So, beginning of the match, we know where our team is. We have a pretty good idea where the enemy is going to be. What are the routes available to us? Now, first of all, before we get to that, we need to talk, what are the objectives? Because you might be surprised. There are people out there who just don't really, I think, understand what the objectives are. Now, this one is the pretty straightforward. Capture the enemy base or destroy the enemy tanks. So destroy all the enemy tanks is pretty straightforward. And the enemy base, obviously, is here. The fact that it's a red icon, a big red icon, doesn't make it the enemy base that we need to capture. The fact that it's got a flag on it does. And I had a match where there was a guy who specifically didn't understand that when it says capture the base, it doesn't mean just any red base. It means the base with the flag on it, even if it's gray. So that's something to keep in mind. And also, we have a base here that the enemy will be trying to capture. I don't support a defend the base strategy. I'm just going to say that, but I'm not going to get into detail with why that is, because that's going to kind of distract from the point. the bottom line is we can see that we have a green base with a flag in it that the enemy can capture in order to win. Right? So now we understand the objectives, we understand what we're working with. The goal is to play the objectives. Any PvP game, it's to play the objectives. Now you may be there, the enjoyment you get may be in hunting and destroying other tanks, but the way you win the match and progress and become a better player is to play the objectives while hunting the enemy tanks. So I think that's where a lot of people get lost. They don't recognize the objectives, or they don't think they're important, so they just mill about trying to find things to shoot at. Not very helpful. So we know what the objectives are. Now how do we get to them? Basically, there's this route here is the direct route. And the reason why this one's the direct route is because there's an elevated, I'm pretty sure it's a railroad track, or at least a road that runs along here. So if you're on the south side of that, you can be below the line of fire of the enemy. They can't hit you if you go along that outer edge like that, and that becomes the direct route to the enemy base. And we've got one of the roundabout options, which is sort of like this. This is a town up here that provides cover, so if you clash with the enemy in this upper area, you moved up this way and they moved up that way at the same time, you met in the middle, there's cover that you can find in there so that you're not just shooting each other in the open. Not too many people fight here. However, it has to be said, they like this spot up here. This is a raised plateau, like so, and it's got a slope here and a slope here leading up to it. And I don't like fighting in spots that involve slopes, because I have so many tanks that are just so damn slow, or I've driven so many tanks that are so slow. If I can avoid having to drive up a slope to get to where I want to fight, I will. Everyone seems to end up here, however, so that's something to keep in mind. If you're passing this way, don't overlook what's going on up here, because if the enemy goes up here without any opposition, they can shoot down on you and kind of make things a little bit more difficult than they need to be. And that's really the beginning of the match. All that is information that you can find out almost immediately just by glancing at the mini-map. You know where you are, where your artillery is, where the enemy is, probably where their artillery at least starts, and what the routes are to get to the enemy base, or at least the base that you need to capture if it's a neutral base that both teams will be fighting over. A short while into the match, this is sort of how things have played out. And that's what I like about this sort of time-lapse, freeze-frame telestrator approach, is that you can see in an expedited fashion just how your tanks are moving in certain directions, in certain groups. The enemy is appearing in certain places, they're clashing, they're doing all kinds of crazy stuff. And then we can kind of freeze it and say, okay, now what can we assess based on what's right on our screen right now? Well, we've got, starting from the top, we've got this clash going on up here. We've got this heavy, another of our heavies, and then we've got two mediums fighting with a blob of enemy tanks and a medium over the hill. This is an example, like I was saying, I don't necessarily like the hill because of the tank thing. But if I'm the guy who's kind of, maybe I'm this heavy and I decide, you know what, I don't want to go up the hill. I think this hill is stupid. I don't think it's important to fight on the hill. I would rather, you know, our goal is to get to the base anyway, so to hell with the hill, I'm going to go this way, and I'm going to leave these guys to their own devices. It's very, very easy to be right and lose. So strategically, whether you agree with me or not, you could say, like, hypothetically, that I'm right, that this hill has no value, there's no reason to be fighting here, and that in a different world, I would be better off abandoning these guys and going around towards the base. But what happens if these guys just barely lose? And then these guys hopped up on goofballs from their victory start putting shells in my ass from the top of the hill. Now I'm dead, and these guys are dead, when if I had stayed and supported my team, we might have won. We may not have won with a lot of extra tanks to spare. Maybe we had half a heavy tank left over when the fighting was done, but we'd be in better shape than if I decided to be right and abandon my team and come down this way. So there's that going on, and I just wanted to point that out when you're looking at that, saying, okay, well, this is where the fighting is, but I don't like fighting on the hill, so to hell with them. Sometimes if I don't know where I need to be, I need to go where my team is, not where I think is strategically important by myself. So that's one thing that we can get from looking at the minimap. This is one of our options if we're looking for a place to go, depending on how quickly we can get there and what we think we can contribute. We've got our SPG here. He's in a pretty decent place for this map because it is such a flat map for the most part, excluding the hill. And there's a lot of hills and berms and rocks and things like that tanks can hide behind. But it's not a difficult map to play as artillery. I think his biggest challenge is going to be the fact that he has no support back here, which is not necessarily a bad thing. As artillery, it's very frustrating. It's actually more frustrating to have support on the back lines and still watch an enemy tank dance through them and blast the snot out of you because everyone else is just kind of, picking their nose and not really paying attention to what's going on. At least if I'm this SPG and I'm sitting back here, I know I have no support. I know if the enemy tank shows up that I'm in deep, deep trouble. I can do what I can to respond, and if I get blown up, so what? Sometimes that's the nature of playing as an artillery. But this guy, he could be in trouble. Down here we've got the campers. These guys are in their Cunninghams and their tractors, the Luch tractors or whatever the hell they're called. They're just having flashbacks all day long. These guys here and this heavy here, not really contributing. They're not really in a position to contribute. Remember, there's a wall right here that's preventing them from getting clean shots on the enemy tanks from where they are. They can get shots in through the windows, but not the way they could contribute if they were actually taking a risk and getting involved in the fight. I have a bit of difficulty seeing heavies on the back lines. These heavy tanks, especially when you lose, and you lose kind of narrowly because the enemy just waltzes through all your squishy tanks because you had no heavy tanks on the front, and then you look on the map and you see your heavy tanks are trying to play defense on the back lines. If you're this heavy tank here, the message that you should be getting when you're glancing at the minimap, you see a fight going on up here, and then another fight going on down here, and you're over here. That's your indicator to gun it and get up somewhere that you can be useful. Again, using the minimap to our advantage. Down here, we've got, this is my tank, my T-29. We've got another heavy and a medium, and we are directly in the line of fire against these guys. And that's part of it. We have to take that risk to get into the line of fire because the only way to be, shooting at tanks is to be in the line of fire. That's kind of the way it works. So we're down here doing what we can to break through the enemy resistance up by their base. And these guys, we're hoping, ideally, that they're going to get into the game, figure out what's going on, and push the front as well. That's a thing. Now this is sort of the advanced stages of the match. Things are kind of, it's not fully decided yet. There's still things that could go wrong, but by all appearances, we're in pretty good shape. And again, the glance at the minimap, now I stopped it here for one very specific reason, and I'll just pause for a moment and let you decide what that reason might be before I tell you. This guy. Now I already talked about this and how this guy can sort of expect that if the enemy gets through, he's going to have problems. This guy here could have been up on the hill, or he could have been down here and not spotted, and just kind of waltzed his way through here, and then blam, he appears. And there's no one here to prevent our SPG's untimely demise. It's just one of those things. Now, if I'm an SPG, like I said, there's few things more infuriating than seeing tanks on the back lines that you would expect would be in a position to respond when they hear the beep beep, telling you that a tank has appeared, and realizing that this guy has just spotted our SPG. Like seeing this guy here, hasn't moved all match. If I haven't realized that, that's very difficult to accept as an SPG when this guy doesn't do anything to help out, because we don't know what's going on. We're hoping he's in a position where he can respond, but he doesn't, and then we get blown away, and we're sad. Very frustrating. Up here, we've still got tanks in the fight, and this is actually 2 enemy heavies. It's hard to tell by the minimap, but they're stacked on top of one another, the enemy heavies. As long as we've got tanks up here fighting, these guys aren't really a threat to what's going on down here, because they're not about to turn around and take shells in the ass just so they can get down here. It's just not the way most people work. Our 2 absentee heavies have decided to join the fight, which is always fantastic. We could say you're assholes for taking the song, or we could say, hey, thanks for joining us. Glad to have you. I'm the glad to have you, even if in the back of my mind I'm thinking, finally. They're up, moving towards the base. We've got this medium, who was previously back here, realizing that we have enemy medium and 2 enemy heavies, and more enemy tanks somewhere based on the readout at the top of the screen, so he's moved up into a position to spot and see what he can find sort of up in this area here, which is not a bad place for him to be under the circumstances. It's better than just kind of sitting over here doing nothing. And then we've got me here, another heavy, and a medium, who are about to move on to the circle and start capping. Because at this point, we know there's Invisi-tanks, we know there's 2 heavies, we know there's a medium. We could be cocky and sit around on the outside of the circle, saying we're just going to send one guy in so that the enemy hears the siren and they come running and we're going to shoot them and stuff. Sometimes it's just a waste of time, is what that is. The extra experience that you get would be more than made up for by winning the match and then moving on to the next match and earning more experience that way. So I'm a big proponent. If you're there and you're in a position to cap, start capping. Just get it going. And realistically, like I say, we can't assume anything at this point, but it's a pretty safe bet that we're in very good shape, and as long as we're staying alert, keeping an eye on our minimap, we're going to take a victory out of this. And this is basically how it ends. We've got... Okay, again, we'll start at the top. These guys are still fighting the good fight up top. There's 2 enemy heavies. We've got a heavy and a medium up there. If this was earlier in the match, I'd be a little bit concerned for these guys, and I would be assessing whether or not it would be viable for me to go up and support them if I wasn't actively involved somewhere else. But for now, same as before, as long as we've got these guys here aren't going to be too worried about what we're doing down here. We've got this medium here, and this guy here. I'm not sure which one spotted this guy, but, you know, they're spotting. They're, again, better than sitting in a bush somewhere far from the action. We don't necessarily need to worry too much about this medium unless he tries to move in and just start taking shots to interrupt the capture. Realistically speaking, we know where he is. He probably knows we know. He's sort of suppressed. And then up here, what I thought was really tragic and amusing all at the same time. We've got our medium who killed our SPG, who appears to be afraid of our AFK tank destroyer. And so he's just kind of hiding off in the distance. Now, it's possible that he's also afraid to start capping because he knows that draws attention when we hear the siren. But I think more realistically, at this point, he's probably sustained some damage, and he knows that perhaps a single shot from the tank destroyer would wipe him out. So he's trying to preserve a little bit of credits by not getting killed by the AFK tank destroyer when he could have earned more experience by getting the free kill. Sometimes that's just how it works out. And there we have it, victory, which I wish I could see that all the time, but we don't. And there's sometimes you just get outplayed, sometimes the composition wasn't in your favor, sometimes people should have seen this guide. You never know. It's hard to say. If you like this format, if you like this kind of thing with the time-lapse and the telestrator, let me know. If you want me to do more, like the video, click the like button, leave a comment, leave your feedback. If you want to be notified when I add the next video, you can subscribe to my channel. That's one way. Another way is to follow me on Twitter at Enigmius1 and or Google plus Enigmius1 to get notifications that way too. Thanks for watching, guys, and take care.